One overlooked and often under-discussed verse in the Bible is Zechariah 11:17, and many Bible scholars do believe that this relates to the Antichrist. The verse reads as follows: "Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock! The sword shall be upon his arm, and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened." Generally speaking, the verse is interpreted to mean that the Antichrist will have some sort of injury to his right eye and his right arm, although it does not specifically say his right arm being affected. So let's talk about this verse for a couple of minutes. The first thing I want to point out is the word idle and idle shepherd, and that is rendered as worthless in other translations. We're looking at the King James translation here. If we go to our Strong's Concordance and look up the word idle, we see the word alil, which means something that has no value. It is simply worthless. And the connection is also to a false idol. So in this case, idle shepherd not only means worthless, but it is a reference to him being a false idol. The reason I want to talk about this verse is that I get questions all the time as to whether this might relate in some way to Donald Trump. And that came up again yesterday as video made the rounds of him having some sort of mark on his right hand that he attempted to cover up with makeup. This particular footage showed one of the cameramen specifically focusing in on Trump's right hand while he was speaking to the media. I'm sure that won't make Trump too happy should he find out about this, but it is well known that Trump has had a bruise on his right hand for a few months now, and the White House and Trump himself have said that the bruising comes from him shaking thousands and thousands of hands, which is very possible. Trump does have a reputation for his power handshakes in which he attempts to assert dominance or control, and undoubtedly some of the people he shakes hands with attempt to squeeze his hand just as hard as he's squeezing theirs. Toss in the fact that as we get older, we do tend to bruise more easily, and it's very possible that the mark on his hand isn't a sign of any kind of disease, but simply people pressing on that area thousands of times over the months. Now, Trump putting some makeup on that area where he has the bruise is hardly a surprise. Trump is well known to wear a lot of makeup, and he prefers the makeup that makes him look golden. And it's more obvious in some pictures because of the lighting than it might be in others. Now, to be fair, Trump is not the first man to wear a lot of makeup. For example, these guys made a living out of it. But in Trump's case, sometimes he's wearing so much makeup that I'm guessing people around him are just uncomfortable with it. This picture where he's sitting opposite of Netanyahu, who is just staring at Trump, it's almost a reminder of the fairy tale The Emperor's New Clothes by Hans Christian Andersen. In this case, everyone around the emperor is pretending that he looks perfectly normal. I think there's a little symbolism here, too, in that because so many Christians believe that Trump is a defender of the faith, a man of truth, and someone who is fighting evil, his wearing what is in essence a fake face does symbolize how he's really someone else underneath it all. Now, getting back to the verse in Zechariah, it, of course, speaks of something happening to the right eye of the Antichrist, and how eventually it shall be utterly darkened. Trump does have an issue with his right eye, or more specifically, the right side of his face, and some people speculate that he had a stroke at some point, which would cause one side of his face to droop down. But we do see many pictures of Trump where his right eye is noticeably different from the left eye. But as to whether this verse is being fulfilled right now, either by Trump or by someone else, I do not think so. I believe that this verse in Zechariah is related in some way to Revelation 13:5 and how the Antichrist is given 42 months to continue. This 42 months relates to when the Antichrist enters the third temple and proclaims himself to be God. It is halfway through the final 7 years and happens when he breaks the covenant with many. But the reason I connect the verse in Zechariah to Revelation 13:5 and Daniel 9:27 about the covenant with many is that I think these verses are telling us that something is going to happen to the Antichrist. He is going to be physically injured in some way. That could be through violence, such as an assassination attempt. It could be through something like a stroke or some other event that injures him. Adding to that interpretation is that at some point after the Antichrist is given 42 months to continue, the false prophet has the world make an image to the beast that is given life. The image of the beast will speak, which to me suggests that the Antichrist at some point will no longer have the power to speak. Or at least he won't have the power to speak as he once did. So looking at the verse in Zechariah, I do think that this refers to a future time when the Antichrist will be severely injured, an injury that impacts his right eye and arm, and possibly his ability to speak. That could be a stroke, that could be violence of some kind, but it does seem to make the most sense that the verse in Zechariah is related to when the Antichrist is given 42 months to continue, as well as the image to the beast having the power to speak. So as far as how Trump's right eye and hand look right now, this would not be a fulfillment of Zechariah 11:17, but it very well could be a foreshadowing of what is to happen. Because I do believe that the Antichrist will suffer an injury or impairment right around the time that he enters the third temple. And it is at that point where he is given 42 months to continue. He is imbued with the power of Satan to continue despite the injury to his right eye and right arm, and even losing the power to speak properly. So those are my thoughts on Zechariah 11:17. Thank you for taking the time to watch. And I'd like to remind everyone that in any comments you leave, please avoid using profanity. This issue is cropping up a lot more lately, and I delete a lot of comments that have cursing, and I would just ask you to please use other words that can adequately express how you feel. I know you can do it if you try. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.